So let's talk a little bit about hatred as a synonym for home, which is the title of our breakfast this morning. I don't think I have to remind you of the events of August 11th and 12th. Shocked our country, shocked all of us. Do you remember where you were? It's almost kind of a 9/11 question. Do you remember where you were? I was in rural Wisconsin, camping on a farm. I went to do a run for some groceries, and I had my radio on. And I was hearing this report from where I did not know, because I was disembodied from the event. I couldn't see it, of course, you can only hear it. I had no context. My phone didn't work out in the country, and I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't know where it was happening, and I was trying to piece this all together throughout the weekend. Of course, we all kind of learned that over the subsequent days and weeks since then, and in fact, of course, ongoing, because the folks were back again in Charlottesville this last weekend. I got a call at the end of August from Felissa Mitchell with the library system at the University of Virginia. And she said, would you like to know what we are doing in Charlottesville since those folks came to our city? Felissa and I knew each other because she proposed for the forum for our conference in April. And by the way, Dean, she's going to be accepted. A really unique program, just as a moment, a really unique program working with persons of color within HBCU in North Carolina to develop a pipeline for persons of color in library systems. So really unique, very interesting work, as an aside. And I said, yes, of course, I want to know what you all are doing in Charlottesville. And a shout out to Felissa, she recruited our panel. And so here we are today. We've all heard the media accounts. We all heard what happened in Charlottesville, filtered through other people's opinions and thoughts and perhaps experiences, but today we're going to hear from the people who were on the ground. These folks lived it and are living it. They are leaders in their community trying to solve the question for them of what Charlottesville was all about for them and what it's all about for us. So we'll hear from them their first-person accounts. We'll hear about the planning and things they're doing in the aftermath of Charlottesville and the ongoing aspects of Charlottesville. But even more, what we're going to discover today and what we're going to talk about at our tables and with this group of folks is the how and the what do we do about it. How do we get here? Why do we have a group of white men in particular, young men in particular, likely affluent young men, feeling as though they're disenfranchised, that their future is foreclosed, and that if people of color win, they lose? How does that happen? So I'm going to talk about that today, all of us. And to get us started, I'm going to introduce my boss, the chief. Yeah, exactly. Always a good plan, exactly. It's always good, and I've got a great bio here for it. The Chief Diversity Officer of the University of St. Thomas. Her name is Artika Tyner, and Dr. Tyner, I'm going to just read this, is a passionate educator, award-winning author, sought-after speaker, and advocate for justice. At the University of St. Thomas, she serves as the Associate Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion and is committed to training students to serve as social engineers who create new inroads to justice and freedom. Artika received her BA from Hamline University. It was a major in English with a certificate in conflict studies. Her passion for social justice and education policy reform led her to graduate studies at the University of St. Thomas. Recognizing that law is the language of power, she pursued and has a law degree. Subsequently, a law degree wasn't enough. Artika also earned a Master of Public Policy and Leadership in order to gain tools for affecting social change through policy reform. Later, inspired by the legacy of W.E. Du Bois, she obtained a doctorate in leadership, which provided her with tools for serving in her community and promoting social justice. So I give you our panel and Dr. Artika Tyner.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm excited to see each and every one of you, but especially excited to see many of our students who came. Because a part of our mission related to the University of St. Thomas is training the next generation of morally responsible leaders who promote the common good, who seek justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before God, as the prophet Micah told us. So when we think about that, that gives us a unique responsibility and also a unique challenge to beg the question of how will we train those leaders? How will they engage in the community? What will our classroom look like? So me, I'm a proud Tommy. I forgot it was Tommy Tuesday. Please don't tell. I thought bring a little variation to my normal gray, purple, and black. So the reality is, in being a Tommy times 3, I recognize that I also have a responsibility to create the type of learning experience that I had both inside and outside of the classroom. And in particular, when I think about what that means, it's an opportunity to challenge the next generation of social engineers. And that's what inspired me to become an attorney and also a law professor who taught at our law school for nearly a decade. But I can't say it was a journey that I found on my own. I was inspired by a man by the name of Charles Hamilton Houston. Has anyone heard his name before? Okay, we got a couple hands, but I hope we have a couple more. So I have a challenge for you. So throughout the day, please notice I'll give some challenges. Please see the movie Marshall, because Marshall, Justice Thurgood Marshall, was what? One of the mentees of this man, legendary man by the name of Charles Hamilton Houston, who Dr. King said that he changed the highway to justice to make it a freeway. He expanded it by expanding the notions of justice and freedom. But why do I bring up Charles Hamilton Houston in this context? Because it's important in the sense that he said a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. So I said, ouch, never want to be in the latter category. But more importantly, he took it a step further when he was talking about lawyers, but I think we can also talk about community members and each one of us. He said we also should serve as a mouthpiece for the weak and a sentinel guarding against what is wrong. What's a sentinel? Does anyone know? You're watching. You're standing guard. So when we think about this, the question is not only about Charlottesville today. It's about watching and asking, where are we standing guard for justice in Minnesota, around the nation, and around the world? So when we think about that, we could focus this dialogue on, and I was tempted. I was starting to do my legal research and going to Westlaw and starting to explore. I'm like, is this about the First Amendment that tells us Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble or to petition the government for a redress of grievances? Is this just about the First Amendment? And we can make the legal arguments and say yes, or we can say no, or we can do the Minnesota thing and say somewhere in between. You might win, I might win, and we're all on the same continuum because we're nice. But the reality is we have different questions to explore. We have the questions to explore of not why. I'm just returning from South Africa, so bear with me. A little jet lag sets in here and there, so just maybe snap your fingers. I'll perk back up. But the question that I continue to hear from people is why? Why apartheid? Why the challenges that we have today? But I challenge us today because why just gets into the emotion, how we feel, how we perceive. The questions today that we're going to go into are the how questions. How did we get here? Related to our laws, our policies, our culture, myths, biases, stereotypes, taxonomic structures, what's good versus evil, hegemonic assumptions, those things that we hold so close and dear to us, but are they really true or are they an illusion? So when we beg all of these questions of the how, our goal today is to connect the mind, because we're an institution of higher education, so of course there should be some thinking happening here, the hearts of what does this very essence of justice mean, and the soul. So let it be a soul-stirring day, a soul-searching day, to beg the question of how did we get here? But more importantly, we'll conclude with a different question. And this question I actually am borrowing from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And that question is a where question. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Yeah. With that, I'll turn it to my friend Rick, who will play a short video for us to set the context, to give us a glimpse of Charlottesville in August.
we are here in a moment of unity in our state, without ill will, to say it's time to move the flag from the Capitol grounds.
If we take down these statutes and don't change to become a more open and inclusive society, then all of this would have been in vain.
Today, we urge you to avoid a divisive decision that will not build any bridges and will likely generate a divide in our community.
The motion carries 3-2. Undertaken a whole number of different projects about race and truth-telling here and getting our public spaces correct. And that's put us on the radar of some really far-right groups.
So please, go home and never come back. Take your hatred and take your bigotry. There is no place.
I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives
So the video lays the foundation of Charlottesville on August 12th. But as many of you know, if you've been watching the news, Charlottesville revisited just a few days ago. So before we transition into our panel discussion, I'd like to start with Pastor Brenda offering us a brief prayer as we start this conversation.
And I'm not going to be praying by myself. Let's sing Amazing Grace. If you know anything about the Black church tradition, find your part. All right? And listen, okay? That's how we sing. We have to listen to each other. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Last verse. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've new last days to sing God's praise. Then when we first begun. We are in your presence. We are in each other's presence. Let us reason together. Let us speak together. Let us listen together. Let us resolve together. We ask in the matchless name of Jesus, who is Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Brenda.
Welcome.
So we'll begin with, and we'll also have Dr. West joining us as well, so you'll see him with us. But we'll begin with each panelist giving us a sense of their story as it relates to Charlottesville, as it relates to a narrative that was referred to as rage, violence, and hate. So asking the question of how do we get here, and how has it been informed by your own narrative and life experience? So we'll start with the educator on my left here. Dean, will you get us started with a piece and a glimpse of your story, please?
Sure. So I joined the university a year ago as their university librarian. I'm also on the faculty in the English department. This is my third time at the University of Virginia, though I was there.
Recidivist.
I'm a recidivist, yes. I did my PhD there in the 80s and spent 10 years as a faculty member and administrator there in the 90s and early 2000s. Brought my kids up there in that community. Still have a lot of friends from years ago. And the events of August 11th, which were the events on the university campus, are the ones that are closest to home for me, literally, because I live on the lawn. I live in Pavilion 2, which is one of the residences interspersed with the student rooms on the lawn. It's right next to the rotunda. And so all of that initial round of torch bearing went by our front windows and out to the statue around the corner in front of the rotunda. I wasn't there that evening. I was watching it on Facebook from about 20 miles away, where I was visiting my son and his family. I came back in the morning because the library was scheduled to run a day of sort of a teach-in, counter-programming to what was going to be going on downtown to give people who didn't want to be in the fray a different way to think about what was going on that day and to contribute to something constructive. We had 35 or so presentations by faculty. They're really more informal than that makes it sound. They were discussions. That was disrupted when state of emergency was declared at noon that day, so we had to shut down the program and send people home. I sent student workers home. We kept 2 libraries open that are adjacent to each other, and I spent the day out in front of the libraries where I could see the entrances to both libraries because we weren't sure what was going to happen and who might show up. We kept the libraries open as an oasis. There were people visiting campus, on campus tours that day. There were parents, there were students. Most of the students hadn't come back at this point, but there were plenty of students on grounds nonetheless. And it later became clear that in the events of the evening of the 11th, where you might have seen there were a bunch of men with torches around the Jefferson statue, and students had gotten there first and arranged themselves in a sort of circle around that statue to protect, I think, the better parts of some of the university's legacy. And they were beaten. They had torch fuel thrown on them. And a couple of administrators, the dean of students, a psychology professor, Walt Heinecke, and one of my librarians, Tyler McGill, were there, and they sort of dove into the scrum and tried to help out the students. Tyler, turns out, had a vein damaged in his neck by being bludgeoned with a torch, and 2 days later, he was in a closed library building that was being just at the end of a renovation. He was there putting books back on the shelves. and he had the beginning of what turned out to be a stroke.
Yeah.
And he was all alone in that building. A couple of people who were insulation contractors found him and helped him out of the building. And he actually had the stroke at the hospital, which was a very fortunate thing. Tyler was there in the intervening day, and you might have seen pictures of him walking behind Jason Kessler, one of the local bloggers who helped to organize this, and another UVA alum. Spencer's not the only one. Tyler was the guy with his arms in the air, walking behind Kessler, chasing him out of the news conference, sort of exercising him from Charlottesville. And Tyler is a self-described member of the Dirtbag Left. He shares activism with a lot of my librarians and an interest in social justice. And I'm not at all surprised that he was there on the spot and that he chose to insert himself into the melee in the way that he did. You'll be glad to know he's recovering. There was a very generous outpouring on a GoFundMe campaign that will probably pay off his mortgage. And Tyler will be back working in the library soon, I hope. So the effects were, on the academic front, on the attempt to have a reasoned discussion was shut down by the state of emergency. There were personal staff effects. There were effects for all the people who live on that community on the lawn. And it really is, it's an unusual thing in a university. It is a residential community in the middle of this university. And students were literally hiding in my neighbor's basement during this event. Larry Sabato, you might know him from election coverage. And he took in a bunch of students and hid them in his basement. The student rooms have only one exit, and it's out onto the lawn. There's no other way to get out of those rooms. So there was a lot of fear. There's still a lot of anger, I would say. In the days afterwards, you might have seen the "This is not us" hashtag. There was a real conversation around grounds that's still going on about that notion. And a lot of people saying, if you think this is not us, you haven't been paying attention. This is not us because this is not your experience, but it's not that you couldn't see that it was going on. You just chose to ignore it because it didn't seem to apply to you. And I don't think the question is so much, how did we get here? But why are we still here? It's not like we left and came back. This is a continuum, and we have to find a way forward, and we have to find a way to actually leave this condition.
Thank you. To our next panelist, I will refer to him as the servant leader who's in the trenches working with the young people, inspiring them to bring forth the change and to beg those types of questions of why are we still here? Our brother Juan, would you like to lead us?
Thank you very much. My name is Juan Diego Wade. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, which is the capital of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and also was served as the capital of the Confederacy. Yeah. And finished high school there. I went to Norfolk State University, which is HBCU. And while I was there, a professor from UVA came and said, come to UVA for grad school. It's a great place to come. They have funds available for you. And I did it. I went there to get my master's in urban and environmental planning. But just to kind of set the setting, the difference from Norfolk State University, which is a state university, and UVA at the time I didn't think it was possible. These are two state schools, and the funding and the resources that they had was incredible. We only had one library at Norfolk State University. And when I got to UVA, I found out there were 20 or 30 of them. But so I went to UVA, went there, met my wife, and we decided to make Charlottesville our home. We love Charlottesville. Although we hadn't planned to stay there our whole, we planned to do a few years there and then maybe move on to Atlanta or Raleigh or DC. We decided to make Charlottesville our home because we loved that place. And so what happened on 8/12, it really shocked us. It did. That level of violence, to see people walking around very organized, very with high-powered rifles and, you know, things. It really was very disheartening. I have a daughter that's in the 10th grade that attends Charlottesville High School, and I'm one of those who worked in the trenches for many years as volunteer and mentoring, and in 2006 decided to get political and join the school board, and when that happened, first, you know, thought that happens that in 2 or 3 days we're going to have our teachers come back, and then within a week our students will be back. And what are we going to do? This is right here. Charlottesville is only 10 square miles, and I strongly believe that the group that Heather Heyer was with, they were going to Friendship Court, which is a low-income community about a block from the downtown mall, that they heard the white supremacists was going there because it has a lot of immigrants, African Americans there. They were going there. The group were going there to protect our community. And I have 3 mentees that live in our community that I see practically on a daily basis. I know their families, I know their brothers and sisters, I know. And so I wasn't part of this. I was at home that day in the morning. I was at the library with some of my mentees at another library. Ironically, we were supposed to be at the library right next to Lee. And about a week out, they'll say, you know, we think that the crowd might be kind of bad, so we're counseling closing the library. And so we moved to another library. But later that day, when everything started to happen, I called my mentee's mother, one of my mentee's mother, and I said, "How's Johnny doing? How is he doing?" She said, "He's in his bedroom and he's scared." This is a 7th grader, you know, pretty macho, but he was in his bedroom. He was scared. He was scared. And she said, "You know what? I'm scared too." That then, you know, even now, I just saw him a couple of days ago. They're very watchful of. They're very watchful for white men. It's kind of ironic now because it's now before, you know, you be scared of a black guy walking around, and now if it's 3 white men walking together, you're gonna get, you know, what's up, you know? And so it's kind of, some of the things have kind of changed in Charlottesville a little bit, and of course they've come back, and so 812 is really kind of changed some of the dynamics in the community, particularly and how we deal with it on the school board, because you know, I did transportation planning for 20 years for my local government, and I thought that I had heard it all as far as people being upset and passionate about an issue. That was before I got on the school board. And man, you're dealing with someone's kids. I had never seen that level of, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but when this happens, I know that I am in charge of the chair of the school board, this person's most valuable asset. And what are we going to do to protect it? And it was a big responsibility for us. So the two districts, we got together, we did a very statement that we sent out to the parents, to the teachers, and the teachers got together. We had to completely change all of our training, our teachers' orientation as they were coming back, because they were going to have to deal with that. We have a 3-year-old programs. We have students that we're going to have to deal with in our district from 3 years old to probably 19, even 20 years old. And in all of those ages, how you kind of work through this is completely different. So we gave our teachers the tools that they would need, so that, because they know the kids the best, you decide what, you know, the best way, and it went the gamut of how they dealt with it. But it's still with us. Just last week, we had a very real life threat that referred to 812 and referred to Las Vegas. And we had a lockdown, and it scared me. You know, whenever the superintendent calls you at 6 o'clock in the morning and begins to send it with the FBI, it's not a good thing. And so we're still dealing with this whole 812, and every time something happens, people are very protective of these symbols. And I have to say to someone, you know, I grew up in Richmond. I think that half of the schools I went to was named after a Confederate soldier. And maybe I was brought up in the 70s. I'm 51. It was a different level of tolerance then. And I think that they're starting to come down. They're questioning in Richmond, Virginia now. Charlottesville is a few months or years ahead of maybe Richmond and how we're addressing it. But with the schools, we have to be very measured in what we do and how we approach it because of the children that we're dealing with. We have to be able to teach it. My wife is from Hartford, Connecticut, and her view on the Civil War and how we were taught in Richmond is completely different. I think they did it a week or a few days, and we spent, I don't know, a half a year, if not a year, on it in Richmond public schools. It may not be that way now, but it's completely different where you live and how you affect it. And so 812 is something that, again, that we as a school district and will have to deal with for many years to come. I'm not sure if it's ever going to go away. I'm pretty sure that the youth that live through it, they're going to have impacts because those images and things that you saw on TV, it's something that, because we're 10 square miles, the kids know, they see, they visit. It's not a foreign, it's not in Somalia or a different type of, place around the world. It's in their backyard, literally in their backyard. And they saw the violence and the rumors that were going around the day of 8/12 that there were people going around in vans, grabbing kids, shooting them, and these things like that. It was none of those things were verified, but this is the fear that was going on, and it hasn't left. Certainly not the parents. So that's the approach that I'm coming from as a school board member.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you.
I'm Brenda Brown Grooms. I'm glad to be here. I don't sally forth unless I have to. I just finished moving the 2 days before I got on the flight that didn't happen to get here. I'm a stroke survivor, and the most salient after effect of my stroke is that I don't have a lot of energy. When I use it up, it's gone. I have to marinate a bit. So I got here a bit early, which is good because Monday is my pajama day. I tell my people at the congregation, don't die on Monday. You can have it. Because I'll come see about your folks, but I'm going to have an attitude. Really? Pick any other day. I'm a pastor, and I belong to the Charlottesville Clergy Collective. And this group originally came together because after the Dylan Roof shootings in South Carolina, Alvin Edwards, who is a pastor and former mayor of the city, said, if such a thing were to happen in Charlottesville, which clergy would I call? And he went, oh, none of them. And so we figured that ought to be fixed. We ought to have a community. And so we began to be a community. We've been meeting over 2 years, and the goal of the collective is to get to know each other personally. Turns out that's exactly the approach we needed to deal with what is happening in not just Charlottesville, but in the nation. We must get to know each other. We must. I've come to have a conversation, which means that I want to talk, and I can talk a lot, but I expect you to talk, and I expect to listen, and I expect you to listen to me. It's reciprocal, kind of like that. You know you're in a bad relationship if there's no reciprocity, and you should run. Just saying. But we must have a conversation. This country has put off this conversation for at least 400 years, and the question is not going to wait any longer. We must have a hard conversation about race and class, poverty, having and having not, education. We must have the conversation, because not to have it is to allow the American dream to die. It was always tentative, you know. Each generation has to watch and do its part to keep the dream alive. But we have come to a fork in the road. It's a crossroads. We are at critical mass, and we must do the hard work of talking to each other and listening to each other. Now, I'm very charming, as you can see. But after you know me about 10 minutes, not so much. Because if I got out of my bed in the morning, if I took those freaking 3 flights all over the world to get to Minneapolis, delayed and missing flights, I didn't come to shuck and jive, y'all. I didn't come to be polite. I've got really good manners, I'm Southern. I know how to do that. But I came to work, and I've come to invite you to work also. This is not about political correctness or being nice, because nice will get you killed. And if I'm gonna die, it's not gonna be over foolishness like trying to be nice. If I'm going out, I'm going the way I came. I was born in a blizzard. I'm going out the same way, okay? Just so you know. Charlottesville is a beautiful, ugly city. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. It's my template for what a city ought to look like. But it has a very ugly underbelly. And I've been here long enough to know that Minnesota is very similar. It's lovely, just lovely. But you've got issues, and being nice isn't going to fix them. What's going to help fix your issues and our issues and the nation's issue is people like us sitting down together, talking about real things. The stuff that makes our heart beat faster, the things that piss us off to the highest sense of positivity. Don't you like that? Thank you. I thought so. One of the things that I, as an African American woman, born in the latter half of the 20th century in the southern part of this country, have understood is that we have a bad habit, many people in this country have a bad habit of telling people that their lived experience is not true. What? Are you insane? When I was in seminary, I went to a touchy-feely class, something like chakra something or another. I didn't expect to get much out of it, but you know, cool. And my partner was Edith Graham Campbell from Scotland, and we were on the floor on mats, and the instructor says, touch each other here. I went first, so I touched Edith about there, and she jumped. And I said to myself, what on earth is she jumping for? I just lightly touched right there. There's no reason for her to jump. But she had tears in her eyes. And I'm going, that's odd. And then it became my turn to get touched right here. And when she touched me, I jumped because pain shot through from my hip down and up. And I said, oh my God, Edith, I'm so sorry. Because I didn't feel it, I didn't think you could possibly be in pain. Because you don't feel it doesn't mean someone is not in pain. Because you don't feel it doesn't mean someone is not in pain. Because I don't feel it doesn't mean someone is not in pain. If someone tells me they are hurting, I believe them. If someone tells you they are hurting, you should believe them. And so when I tell you that it makes my heart bleed to know that black boys and girls can go be out minding their business and be shot by police for no other reason than that their skin is black and brown, it hurts me. You should believe me. Because until we start believing what we tell each other our lived experience is, we're not going to get anywhere. And it's the greatest affront for a human being to tell another person what they feel is that it's invalid or that it couldn't possibly be true because I don't feel it. Charlottesville on July 8th and August 12th, many people were saying, oh, this isn't Charlottesville, this isn't Virginia, this isn't this country. Yeah, it is. Where you been? I'm 62 years old. And that's the Charlottesville I know. In my women's clergy meeting, all three of us are African American. The rest are Jewish, white, Italian, whatever. And the head topic after we debriefed was, I just need a place to be safe. What a novel concept. I've never been safe.
Where's your oasis?
For me, my oasis is God, and I require a lot of silence because I can come out and do this and be on because I go home and I have to recharge. The thought that there are places that are safe is a lovely thought for me, but I've never required it. I've never had it. And most people of color or anybody described as other in any way understand exactly what I'm saying. There are no safe spaces. If you get it, that's good, but that's not the assumption. Do you hear what I'm saying? I don't assume that I'm going to be safe when I go places. I don't assume it. I've never assumed it. I case a joint. I'm casing it now. And I figured out basically that most of you are not insane. There's a spectrum, you know. And so nobody's carrying a weapon. And so I'm probably not going to be shot up in here. I've figured that out. Now, you may be pissed off with me before we get out of here and may wish you brought your gun, but right now we're cool. I have to do that to live. It's second nature to me. And it's second nature to a lot of people of color or of people who are in any way othered. I'm going to say, I know I'm running on, but I speak in metaphors. Sorry, not sorry. I was in a church, St. Paul's Episcopal Church, across the street from the Rotunda on the 11th of August. The clergy group and another group called the Congregate Sheville had worked all summer to prepare people for what we knew was going to be a mess. The city government, the police, the mayor, the governor, no one quite believed us. So we did nonviolent training all summer. And we rolled out a great deal of things to get ready. And even though we were as ready as we could be, of course we weren't ready for what ultimately happened. On the 11th, I was in a church service with Cornel West and Tracy Blackman, and we were locked down in the church because as it happened, about 300 Klans and alt-right people were outside the door, and they navigated across the street to the Rotunda. And after they finally let us out, my friends went to get the car, and I was sitting on the curb by the bank, and I looked up, and I heard this large crowd coming toward me, this babble. And I'm a prayer, and I said, okay, God, see, I've been up all day. I'm a stroke survivor. I used to be completely paralyzed on my right side, head to toe. I was supposed to die or be a vegetable. I'm neither of those things. But when I get tired, I limp. And I didn't bring my cane. And I said, okay, so God, I can barely walk, so I'm pretty sure I'm not going to manage this running. So I need you to help me, okay? This crowd is coming my way, and I cannot get out of the way. You need to back them up, if you don't mind, and do it quickly, because I'm here. And the crowd backed up and went back up the street. And I said, thank you, Lord, I'm appreciative. I was watching the city police go back and forth. From what I've understood, the campus police, who are a separate entity from the city police, had been asked a lot if they needed the city police to help them. And they said, no, we've got it. Well, they did have it. And about 10:30, they finally said to the city police, maybe you ought to come. This is what I've heard. They've got about with Tyler McGill, there are about 31 students and him backed against the wall, being maced, being pummeled. They had balloons with urine in them, all this stuff. And the police did nothing. Do you hear me? They did nothing. They did nothing. That's the night before. And I knew something would happen that night because they had to. They had to do something to presage the 12th. And then on Saturday, I was at the early morning service, and then I went to the First United Methodist Church, was hospitality headquarters downtown, right across from the park. And my job, because we split up, there were bunches of us, we split up around the whole city, and my station was at the church, where there was water and food and first aid and anything else you might need. And we prayed through. While we were there, the police came and the tear gas wafted up to the church and burned our eyes and noses. And we cried because we were live streaming and we knew what was happening outside. Having said all of this, taking a long way around, that was saddening, but it wasn't as surprising as it ought to have been, because what happens when we ignore the obvious, when we ignore what is hurting people, is conflagration. What happens is the 12th of August in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I've sallied forth from my new house to be here to talk with you today, because this is just the beginning, and you better get ready. That's enough for now.
Thank you. Now you can see why we call Pastor Brenda the Soul Force. We have one other panelist that will be joining us, so you can turn your attention to the screen briefly here as well. And we'll refer to him as our activist scholar, educating, mobilizing, advocating, and supporting the young people. Doc, we turn to you.
Wes. Can't hear. Wes. Wes.
You hear me?
Ah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Ta-da.
Hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is it my turn? I was listening to that spirited talk by Miss Grooms, Reverend Grooms. When she talks, you normally listen. Hello?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
You're on, dude.
Sorry about that. So I missed the beginning just because of some technical difficulties and whatnot, but I'll try to give you all my side or my spiel of it of sorts. And thank you all for having us. We really appreciate it. My name is Wes Bellamy. I'm the Vice Mayor of the City of Charlottesville. I think from my perspective, the events that transpired on the 12th, they showed, as Ms. Groom said while she was giving the eulogy at the funeral for a hero of all of ours, Ms. Dr. Holly Edwards, and she said, Charlottesville is a beautiful, ugly city. And I think that was put in the spotlight and very well showed to the national media after or during what transpired on August 12th, and not just August 12th, but also August 11th, and then July 8th when the Ku Klux Klan came. And I mean, these issues have been going on in our community for a very long time. It didn't just start with the calling of the removal of the statue. It didn't just start when people began to show up with an army fatigues and pretend to be militias and just white supremacists who wanted to come and do whatever they wanted to do. We've had these issues for a very long time, and now everyone sees it. So in my opinion, where we are now is a very delicate place, but I think it's twofold. There's good that's coming out of where we are, and then there's some ugliness that's showing where we are, but I hope that even in the ugliness, we're gonna get to the good. So last night we had a city council meeting, which is part of the reason why I couldn't make it to Minnesota. So we literally had a public hearing in which we allowed 26 different people to come and take as much time as they wanted to just clearly express themselves. We've had people shut down city council meetings, shut down planning commission meetings, and people have been rather upset and very passionate about the hurt in which they currently feel. But I think one of the best parts that transpired last night was people expressed themselves. They were looking for empathy, not sympathy, because those two are different things. But they also made it very clear that in terms of the trauma that people have undergone and the lack of empathy from a council perspective, in my personal opinion, needs to be addressed. And I think that we are finally receiving that message. And when I say we, I mean all of the counselors as a whole. And I don't think my colleagues on council are bad people. It's just sometimes kind of you don't really always want to either take accountability or you don't really want to admit certain things. And I think we're at a place now in which we have to. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Furthermore, because we're in which we now have to acknowledge some of our shortcomings, we can move forward in a way in which we go to provide equity throughout the city. So, I mean, I've been using this hashtag New Seville on most of my social media posts, and I think that we are indeed creating a new Charlottesville. This is not the Charlottesville of yesteryear. This isn't your grandmothers or your aunties. Charlottesville is a new day in which people, in my opinion, are very woke. We are going to speak out and speak up about things that we see that are not going well. And we're going to look for solutions and ways for people to work together, but we're not just going to allow entities, and specifically the ideology and the system of white supremacy, which oftentimes enforces itself on marginalized groups, to just continue to be able to do so. Those days are over. We're looking for equity, and equity and equality are two different things. Equity means that you give everyone what they need in order to be successful. Equality just means you give everyone the same thing, and we're looking to provide equity. So last night, the Charlottesville City Council, we allocated $900,000 to housing vouchers for people who live in the city, specifically looking to get individuals off of the housing waiting list through the Charlottesville Housing Redevelopment Authority, which is essentially who handles all of our public housing. So, I mean, that's a huge step for us. That's one thing that took place. We also moved forward with this very, I'm not going to say very controversial issue, but it's been an issue that's been looming for some time in regards to the Belmont Bridge, which is a bridge. Why don't y'all just fix it? What's taking so long? So on and so forth. Well, we actually approved the design and we're moving forward with that. And then one of the things that I'm most proud of, we moved forward with the initial groundwork of creating an independent, community-led citizen review board that's going to review all police complaints and looking at how our law enforcement. And that's something that never would have happened years ago. Probably last year. I know people have been calling on this for some time. and we haven't been able to get it through. But now, in the wake of everything that's transpired, we were able to, again, set the groundwork and be able to move forward with that. And I think those are just some of the good things that have transpired or that have come about of the events of 8/12. You also see, I'm just going to be very honest, a lot of white people in our community coming to grips with the fact that Charlottesville isn't just this place that's all peaches and cream. It's not just Thomas Jefferson's land in which we all just hold hands and sing kumbaya. Like, we're really having to deal with the fact that there are systemic issues, and there's also a lot of covert racism and oppression within our community. And very, quite frankly, I'm very proud to say that white people, Black people, Latino people, but more so than before, in my opinion, a lot of white people are clearly standing up and rejecting the notion of white supremacy. They're speaking up when they see their friends or their classmates or their coworkers or their colleagues say disrespectful things. There's a guy who walks around in Charlottesville every day with a sign that says, West Bellamy is a jackass. He goes around all through different parts of the city. And I'm not going to get into my thoughts about this gentleman. But there have been people who literally follow him or go to where he is. He writes it in chalk, and they erase it, or they scribble it out, or they say, different things like "not in our community." Or there have been people who literally go around and they make a concerted effort to try and understand the thoughts and the feelings of people who don't look like them. They are making a concerted effort to try to figure out exactly how they can play their part in the terms of bridging the divide within our community, or understanding their privilege, or using their privilege to be able to speak up for or help out the marginalized communities. And I think that, in my personal opinion, is a great thing. Lastly, I'll say before I shut up, the African American community is not a monolithic group. And Charlottesville isn't as diverse as some other cities in which we have a multitude of different races. For the most part, we're white and we're Black, and we have a Latino population. But the two races that you have, the largest two races that you have, are white people and Black people. And for the African American community, I think we too are also coming to grips with the fact that we cannot allow things to just be as they were and not speak up or say anything. There are a lot more people who are becoming a lot more vocal about what has transpired. They're saying, hey, I do want my piece of the pie, and I'm willing to stand up and speak up for it and sacrifice for it if need be. But we're not going to allow people to just give us any old thing and then we just take it. And I think that's allowing a large group of people to understand, again, as I alluded to, Black folks are not just a monolithic group. We don't all just think the same thing or do the same thing, as does not any other group. Like, all white people aren't the same, all Latino people aren't the same, all Asian people aren't the same. But I think sometimes when it comes to us, we think that there's only one or two Black leaders, or those group of quote unquote Black leaders, they speak for everyone. And because we're all finding our voices, we're speaking out in different ways, and it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you, Dr. Bellamy. Now here's the opportunity as we transition to start asking some questions directly of the panelists, some of those how questions. And as you're listening to them, I'll raise an initial question, one for each person. I want you to start thinking about some of the questions that you would like to explore based upon what you heard, because you'll also have some time for a table discussion with your group as well. So to get us started, I want to ask a question of Pastor Brenda. I heard you mention earlier, I had the behind the scenes look. I had the opportunity to speak with the panelists. You mentioned this idea around narrative. Whose narrative? What's the narrative about? How did narrative shape the situation in Charlottesville? Yeah. Tell us more about narratives.
Narrative is important. Who gets to craft it and tweak it has generally been, in this society, white people and largely white males. What is happening in this season is that people are noticing, oh, I have my own narrative. Thank you very much. I think what's happened in Charlottesville, in this country, is that we've got the narrative wrong. The narrative that we inherited was always flawed. I'm an Old Testament scholar, and it used to be that you could write a systematic theology. A systematic theology can only be written if you are from the dominant country, world domination, from the standpoint of world domination. People who wrote systematic theologies thought that their culture was the culture. You can't write a systematic theology anymore because nobody, the whole world doesn't think the way I think. You know what I'm saying? And in this country, the narrative that usually goes forth no longer holds. It never made sense to Native Americans. And as an African American, I was very young when I said, wait a minute, something's wrong with this. For me, it became very clear at the last election that there are three narratives that are, three pieces of the narrative that came together in a wicked way. We say that, people say that we didn't listen to poor white and their disaffectation in this election cycle, and so that they helped to put Donald Trump in office. That's incorrect in that it doesn't account for the entire narrative. Yes, many poor white people voted against their own interest, in my view, but also 80% of evangelical Christian women voted for Donald Trump. But none of that would have been enough to elect him if it were not for white, educated, financially well-off men. So those are three strata of the narrative. White, educated, rich men have voted Republican in the last 4 to 6 election cycles. So, do you see where I'm going? If we say the deplorables, as Hillary so unfortunately said, or who put Donald Trump in office, we've got it wrong already. It was a conglomerate, a group of people who came together. They thought their interests were best served by electing this person. Oh, let's not forget Russia. So, what I'm trying to get at is that at any point there are a group of people who make up a narrative, a group of interest, which shape the narrative. And you can put them in or take them out. And what's happening in this country, in my view, is that the narrative makers have lost what they thought was their right to shape the narrative. Because I say, I'm sorry, that's not my story. You forgot me. And I'm loud. I can be quite refined, but I'm also quite loud. And I say loudly, you forgot me. So let's start all over again. The narrative which has run this country, as an African American, all of us know, we're supposed to be a Christian nation. Bull. 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 Because when I was 3 years old, I said, if we believed in God so much, why do we live as we do? Because, folk are not scared of God. If you believe in God, you live a certain way. You just do. And I was very clear that when I would go into a room or someplace and folk would go, oh, they thought I didn't know what I was talking about, or that I ought not to have been there. And I know they didn't know me. I didn't know them. They didn't know me. What are you basing this on? And particularly in churches, because I'm a church rat. If you don't do church right, and for those of you who are not Christian, if you're not, I don't know if you are, when I prayed in my tradition because I understand that this is a Christian university. I didn't mean to exclude you. If I did, I'm sorry. But what people who are in any way othered understand that the narrative that gets told has left us out. And there's a reason why your story is not in the narrative. There's a reason why my story is not in the narrative. And if we want to get at the truth, look at whose stories are left out of the narrative. Hear me what I'll say. And so where we are now is at a point where the narrative, the story, who tells it, how they tell it, why they tell it, has opened up. And folks who are used to controlling the narrative are upset. As a Christian educator once taught me, the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. Hate comes later, but fear is the opposite of love. And what we're noticing with these groups of marauding militia people and clans and alt-right is that they're freaking afraid. They're afraid. Starting in the states of Texas and California, white folks are no longer the majority culture in this country. In Virginia, we had the one-drop rule. If you had one drop of black blood, then you were no longer white. I'm good with that, y'all. But if you have an interest in being white, you might be a little bit upset. Just a tad. Just a tad. Deal with it. The country is browning just as the demographers said it would. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. And it's the thing that anybody who's ever been othered or be called minority kind of knows. We can do a win-win. It doesn't have to be an either or. It could be an and. You let me live, I'm gonna let you live. You hear me what I say? We're not going anywhere. We built this country for free. We're not going anywhere. And by Southern white folks' definition, your numbers are dwindling. They are. And you can be afraid and become monstrous, or you can chill and enjoy life. Because it's a beautiful planet. It's gorgeous here. And I don't know, last time I checked, I didn't get the email saying that there was another place we could go. Did you get it? So, and if they've got any kind of communication, they already heard about us on Earth, and they're not gonna let us in anyway. So we better figure it out, because if we blow this up, there's nowhere else to go. That's enough for now. Okay.
Thank you, Pastor Brenda. I'll next turn to Juan. And a specific question. It's come up for me time and time again. Since you work with young people, the question oftentimes is, when are young people introduced to this concept about race? What does it mean? We saw the CNN report of the young girl who wanted the doctor doll that was African American. The cashier has to remind her that she might want a white doll instead. So what are the roots of some of these issues, and where are the areas where we find promise?
You know, this is something that just amazes me, because I'm a people watcher, and you know, we'll go to the park or something, and you could see little white kids, black kids, everyone playing in the sandbox together. I really believe they might see different colors, but they just see another person, another kid. They are just having the time of their lives. At some point in their lives, and maybe it's the media, it's certainly probably some of the parents, and when they get to school, they start to notice there's something different about you and me. Maybe it's the color of your skin. And we have not only a race problem, but a class problem here in this too. Lord. And so at some point that change starts to take place, where they get the perception that they are better than someone else. I mentor many youth in the community, and some of the youth are white, upper income youth from my church, and the youth I mentor in inner city Charlottesville. A lot of them are males from single mom homes. And I can tell you, young people across the spectrum, they all make stupid and dumb decisions. The difference that I've seen is that my white kids, that they have the resources from their parents and to go to court or to school to get that expunged or changed, and my black kids don't, and that just has an impact. I like to tell the story that, you know, when we go shopping or things, when I take my white youth, we might go to a mall and it might be 15 or 20 of them, some of them inside the store, and out they have different, they may want to show a clothes article, and they would take it out the store. I was like, you can't do that. And the store man said, that's fine, I see it, and I was like, oh. But when we go into, with my black youth, I mean, immediately we walk into the store, we're followed. And I just, you know, I just wonder, what's that like year after year after year? I mean, day after day after day to know that someone is treating you different. So I don't know when that change takes place, but I think that we can do a better job in the schools. I know in Charlottesville, we have broken down some of the barriers that we had as far as AP and advanced classes and things like that. We have unleveled classes where all of the kids, whether you are general or high achieving, you're in that same class, and you can make a decision later if you want to do an extra project. And what we found is that those students, all of them do better, because the smarter kids, they kind of become some teachers. They help some other students, and other students that may not be as strong, they don't want to look bad, so they do better. So we just found that everyone does better. So I think that a lot of that change takes place at a young age, kind of once they start making the decisions on themselves. But we, and this might sound just, you know, pie in the sky, but I think that we can make this change in one generation. If the babies that are born today, if we just from the beginning say, you know what, there's no different. And they are, you know, and we can erase some of the things that is already taking place. I think it can be done in one generation. I know that we don't have a lot of time. If we can survive this 4 years, because you know, after what happened on 8/12, I was really looking for, you know, I thought that would spark something that would spark the president to say something encouraging, that we as a nation, we need to come together. We're all one. But he essentially said that what you were doing is the same as what those white supremacists. You understand that, right?
I got it.
That's not right. That is not right. And so we as leaders, as parents, as community members, when we see those type of things take place, we see those jokes and things take place, we have an obligation to say, that's not funny, that's not right. That young man that your son or daughter or their friends making fun of, they're no different from you. You know, that if they had the same privileges and things that you had, they'd probably be leap years over you as far as survival and being able to do what you're doing. So I don't have a specific year that takes place, but it is very slow and is very gradual. But if we can imagine that sandlot with the kids playing in it, that's what I believe the Lord aspires us to be.
John, now I'm going to turn to you for an answer related to higher education. I know since August and as the weeks have come and gone, you've taken this as an educational and a learning opportunity. How have you engaged the students around the First Amendment, around creating the beloved community, and where do we go from here?
So one of the things that we do in libraries is do exhibitions of things that are in our special collections. Special collections are increasingly what make libraries unique, one from the other. Our special collections at the University of Virginia have a lot of hate in them. They have a history of a university that was built by slaves, where students and student organizations were affiliated with the Klan, where the Klan gave money to the university. All of this is in the archives. August 14th, we were supposed to open an exhibition that was to run for the entire bicentennial year of the university, called The University in 100 Objects. This is based on a book that was written by a guy who works at the Virginia Foundation for the Humanities, and when I go home tonight, I'm going to be going to the opening, which is now taking place with a reading from the author. So the author had picked the 100 objects, and we were doing an exhibition based on that. to educate ourselves and the community about the university's history. The most prominent object in that exhibition was a burned cross. The burned cross was in our collection because we received it along with faculty papers, and the cross was burned on a faculty member's lawn. The cross was burned in the period of massive resistance on that faculty member's lawn when his wife wrote the Saturday Evening Post to suggest that Southerners might actually like desegregation. Someone took exception to that, and that, I guess, was the standard way of expressing disapproval. In fact, they used to, I understand, used to burn crosses on the college president's lawn rather regularly when they didn't like what he was doing. So obviously on August 14th, opening an exhibition that featured that object was a different proposition than it was on August 10th. And to Wes's point that African Americans don't have a monolithic point of view, I could say I certainly saw that when I started asking about what to do around this object and around using it in an educational context. I reached out individually to recent African American student activists who'd graduated from the university, to community members, to others, research archivist who works in our special collections, Irvin Jordan went out to community members and asked, and here's the interesting spectrum of responses that we got. From the people who were closer to the academy, whether they were faculty or students, old or young, and African American, their response was pretty much uniformly, this is history, you can't whitewash history. If we don't exhibit this cross, we're making a big mistake. The farther we got out into the community, the more the response was, are you out of your frickin' mind? You're gonna put that up on the wall now? If you do that, we're gonna know that you're either you're clueless or you're complicit. And so we opened the exhibition without the cross. We left the case there. We put a sign on it, said object removed from exhibition, and we explained it, and we had pictures on the walls of events around the 12th, and one of the memed pictures of Tyler McGill as a giant behind Jason Gessler, and then a really great picture of the candlelight vigil that took place a couple days after the 12th on the lawn. It just filled the lawn. It was thousands of people. It was underreported, I have to say, having been there for that. It was thousands of people. And what I'd like to do as an educator over the coming year, and I think we're going to find a way to finance this, is to do a series of events that alternate back and forth between the community center in town and the university, and begin in the community center by addressing the cross with a faculty member and community members. I hope maybe I can persuade some of you to be part of that conversation. To start there with what's the significance of this object and how should we deal with it in the context of the university's history. By the way, there's a lot of negative and potentially disturbing stuff in this exhibition. This is not the only artifact that would give you pause. So how do we do that? And then a second event back on campus on decentering whiteness in exhibitions. How do you do exhibitions in a cultural institution, especially in a cultural institution that's a majority white institution? How do you do exhibitions that don't focus everything on the majority culture? A third event back in the community on curating hate, where we bring in people from other cultural institutions that have problematic collections, problematic in some of the same ways that ours are, and talk about how do they do exhibitions out of that collection and how do they deal with that material as a cultural institution. And finally, I'd like the last event to be back on the campus and to be international in focus. And I'd like to bring in speakers from Australia, from South Africa, from Canada, from Germany, from places where they have dealt with varying degrees of success and seriousness with a culture of oppression and with monuments to oppressors. And you know, one of the things, the mistakes we make, I think, in America is to think that our history is unique.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are exceptionalist even when we think we're bad. we think we're exceptionally bad. And the experience that we're having and the experiences that we're discussing here are not unique. And while it's true, you know, that you can't really understand this country if you don't look at the history of this kind of hatred in this country, I also don't think you can understand the present unless you look around the world at what's going on in Europe right now, you know, in other parts of the world. Our political situation here is entirely continuous with what's going on across the world. And the last time that happened, it was really bad.
Really bad.
And you know, one of the books that we discussed in the teach-in that we restaged September 23rd, the Dean of Students, who's a lawyer and a free speech on campus expert, and my legal policy advisor and I led a discussion on two books. One was called On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it. It's a brief broadside by a Yale history professor, and it draws explicit parallels between the history in the United States and in Europe in the late 30s and what's going on right now and what just happened in our election. And you know, again, I don't think you can understand the present unless you understand that history.
Yeah.
I mean, we had in 1939 thousands of people show up at Madison Square Garden for a Nazi rally.
That's right.
And you know, that's part of our history. Nazis aren't new. The pesky Nazis, you know, you can't get rid of them. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with them. In some places, in other countries, they deal with them by making fun of them. Rudolf Hess's hometown, plagued by Nazis. They come back every year on his birthday. They used to try to keep him out. Then they tried to run him off. And finally, they all dressed as clowns and came out and treated it like a fundraising drive. And you know, for every meter that they marched, they would give money to a social justice cause while making fun of them. And that worked better than anything else. So there are lessons we could learn from other countries, but particularly in the cultural realm, you know, it's a challenging thing. You must educate about this. You can't educate about it without talking about it. You can't talk about it without presenting the history.
Yeah.
But for many people, and this is what I took away from the discussion about the cross, that's not history. You know, burning crosses, that's my childhood. You know, that happened in my neighborhood when I was growing up. And, you know, so I think cultural institutions and universities also have to pay attention to that. If I could say just a couple quick unrelated things in response to...
What's the second book? On Tyranny and the other was...
Oh, the other book that we discussed was called Freedom from Speech by a guy named Greg Lukanioff. He is a frequent contributor to The Atlantic, kind of libertarian. And it's a pretty standard screed, also a brief broadside against political correctness on campus. And the two books are interesting together if you want to think about First Amendment issues, if you want to think about Second Amendment issues. They're a good pair to read. The range of reference and the sort of erudition and historical awareness in On Tyranny is a lot greater than the Freedom from Speech book.
Yeah.
Its entire range of reference in Freedom from Speech is contemporary. The only other people that he really refers to are other people who write for The Atlantic. So that tells you something. The other two things I just wanted to mention were on narrative. I work with a woman named Juliana Richardson, who's runs an independent nonprofit based in Chicago called The History Makers. And I've been working with her since about 2008. The History Makers is a collection of oral histories of African Americans, long form, unedited, 2 to 3 hours long, from all walks of life. And Juliana started this because she had the experience as a child of not being in the story. Yeah. And the only story she was in was a story about slaves. And she was like, that's not the story I want to be in. So she's been, for the last 10 years, and for about $15 million that she's raised in very difficult ways, she's been recording the stories of people who have contributed to society in business, in law, in politics, in medicine, in science. There's 200 African American scientists in this collection. talking about their experience coming up through the educational system, including an engineer who went to the School of Engineering at the University of Virginia in the 60s. And the only reason he did is because there was no HBCU that offered engineering in the 60s in Virginia. And so what they would do is if you were black, you'd go to an HBCU if they had the program. If they didn't have the program, they would offer you money to go out of state.
Yep.
And if you turned it down, then you could go to the University of Virginia. That's what he did. So there's just incredible stories in this collection. The library licenses it. Other people license it. I invite you to look into it. She has great high school programs. It's a really wonderful organization. The History Makers, where History Makers is all one word. And so I think part of what we need to do in education is tell different stories and make different stories part of the curriculum. And one of her points about this collection is it's not for African American studies. This is for classes on entrepreneurship in the business school. This is for your law school class. This is for your introductory science classes. These are stories to be told across the curriculum. And I think, stories are incredibly powerful.
Yes.
And true stories, even more so.
Even more so.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll now transition to have Dr. West join us again. But before he comes in, I'm going to get to the heart of the question. We're going to transition here shortly to an opportunity for you to discuss some of the lessons that you learned today about Charlottesville and how do you apply it to your organization, your daily life. So Dr. West, I'm going to ask you a question. We're going to get into the real meat of the issue, as my grandmama would say. Proximity. All these things sound great. I can serve on a diversity inclusion committee. I can say I went to another elimination of bias CLE, check the box, I'm a culturally competent gladiator. But Dr. West, help me here. You've received death threats. You've received real challenges of shaming and so forth. But the reality is, with proximity, what are we really asked to do? And what has influenced, my question for you, what has influenced your courage to lead? And leading beyond the traditional distance of just, I'm doing diversity and inclusion, I've served on a committee, I'm your ally, I support you. Tell me the proximity question. How do you have the courage to lead?
Sure. So I'll answer the second question first. I think, as Ms. Grooms was saying earlier, and I even heard Brother Wade talking about a little bit, like our faith plays a role, and my faith plays a role in the work. And I just personally believe that this is what God made me to do. So this is my destiny. This is like everything that I've been doing thus far in my life. My life has led me to this point. So because of that, it is no need for like me to fret or be afraid or anything like that, because I live in a community with a lot of different people who, in my personal opinion, have my back, but also a community and a place in which like we were all put here at this specific time to do this specific thing. So because of that, I mean, there's no reason to be afraid. Let's just walk in God's purpose. That's just kind of how I live my life, right? So to answer the second question, though, or the first question, what should we do, or what will we tell individuals to do in terms of getting involved? I think everyone has to find out specifically what their purpose is, and that's a loaded question or a loaded task. Some people will say, well, I've been living my whole life and I don't know what my purpose is, or I've been trying to do these certain things for a very long time and I haven't been able to find out what to do yet. But even you being at this conference or this seminar right here, right now, this morning, I don't believe that that is by mistake. So you're getting your marching orders right now. And I think it starts from a very simplistic point initially. If you're woke or you consider yourself conscious or culturally competent, are you culturally competent and woke or conscious when you're at the dinner table and you hear someone saying something that you know is extremely disrespectful and against all the values and the things in which you've heard this morning? Do you speak up and address it? When you're at the grocery store, or when you're at church, or when you're at your family reunion, or wherever you are in whichever space you choose to occupy, are you speaking up for the marginalized and addressing issues that you see and that you know are against all of the values of the people in the forum in which you are sitting in this morning. And if that is the case, if you are willing to speak up and speak out at that point in time, I think that's the initial step. And then the second step, and again, in my personal opinion, I'm at a school right now, working at an alternative school. But when we look at, working with our young people, when we're looking at talking to our elected officials and talking about different ways in which we address inequity, what role are you willing to play? Do you say that, well, my voice doesn't matter, so I'm not going to say anything? Are you an individual who says, well, those people are going to do what they want to do anyway, so it's no point in me in doing anything because, nothing's going to change? Or do you give up at the first sense of you receiving some pushback? Are you an individual, again, who uses their platform however you can or however you see fit to create equity? Do you hold your elected officials responsible and accountable for creating equity in your school settings? Are you asking the individuals in position of power or in your classrooms or whatever setting you choose, are you holding them accountable through equity? Are you okay with being comfortable with being uncomfortable? Because that's the next step. And then from there, the policies have to change. And see, there's a whole collective guide in terms of steps and things in which we can do in your individual practices, day-to-day lives, in your collective practices with other groups in which to help implement and change policy. And then lastly, I would say remaining patient. Because, and this is something that I had to learn, I think Juan can attest to this very much. So I used to be a very impatient person. Sometimes I still am a very impatient person. But I spent some time with Andrew Young and Jesse Jackson this summer, and they were telling me both about, I was asking them, well, what was it like when you were with Dr. King? And they both said kind of the same thing, eerily just like the times we're in right now. And they both also said that Martin would always tell them that you must be impatient with people, be patient with people, but be impatient with progress. And be patient with people because we know that people are not going to move as fast as we want. They're not always going to get it as quickly as we want them to, but we must remain steadfast in the push for progress, which makes us impatient in pushing for those things. So with that, and when we as leaders see other people who are willing to step up to the plate, push for progress, speak up, and use their platforms, that gives individuals like myself the courage to know that we can continue to fight. So when I get a death threat, literally we get them every day. I've had people send bomb threats to my daughter's school, all kind of crazy stuff, right? And when we get these very foul and disrespectful messages, or people walk around with signs like West Bellamy's a nigger, or we're gonna hang you and all this other stuff, those things are easier to deal with because I know that there's a group of people who are collectively fighting for the same thing that I am, and I know that God can bring us here to fight during these times to forsake us or leave us right now.
Say amen to that, Dr. West. I know this is a clarion call to action, and this is a transition that I told you about that would be next. The transition at your table. At your table, I want you to take a few moments, because I don't know about you, I've been fed. It's been a feast that nourished my soul today. I want you to talk about with your table mates, and we call this sacred ground of our beloved community coming together. Talk for a moment or two about what are some of the lessons that you're taking away from today. And the second question I would ask you is, what will you do? In my TED Talk, it's actually my 30-year anniversary, I asked the question of what is in your hands to make a difference in the world. And I took it kind of lightly, I'll be honest. But I didn't realize that it would revolutionize people in Tanzania, in Ghana, in China, throughout Europe, and all over the world to say that I can do something and I can lead change. So you'll have about 5 minutes now just initially to talk about some ideas on what's one action step that you can take to help advance equity, as Dr. West talked about, to stir our faith, to better education, and to build a stronger sense of community. So turn to your neighbor, share a story, share some love, and share one thing that you'll do and that you'll take away with you. You want? Now, the professor in me would have been remiss of not packing my backpack with books. So the first one that I'd like to put on your reading list if you haven't read it yet. It's called Einstein on Race and Racism. Why do I like this book?
Yeah.
Because it takes an intellectual pursuit to understanding what is race, how was it socially constructed, and how do we deconstruct race. Now, I don't know about you. When I started reading the book, I'm like, this is not the Dr. Einstein that I know. But I also learned something important about him, that he was called by Adolf Hitler what? He wasn't called Dr. Einstein. He was called not yet hung. So when you think about that, it framed his lens and his reference around what it meant to be marginalized, what it meant to be oppressed in society. In addition, I recommend this book, Man's Most Dangerous Myth, The Fallacy of Race.
Yeah.
Coupled with this, there's also a book by a local author and local community historian, Dr. Mahmoud Al-Qadi, called The Myth of Race, and that's a short read. You can read that in just an hour read. And last but not least, you heard me already describe this, Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? A blueprint. As you talked, Pastor Brenda, it reads like today,
Yes.
Dr. King's final book. Does anyone know what his final sermon was going to be? With the topic? Lazarus and the Rich Man,
That's
Why
right.
America May Go to Hell.
Yes.
So it's something that we have to think about in the times that we're in today. So I want to hear from a few of you about what will you do? What is in your hands to make a difference in the world? Who would like to report back? We want to get a few responses. I saw your hand. You were ready to go. Oh, Man's Most Dangerous Myth, The Fallacy of Race. But I'm going to bring the mic to you, though, because we want to make sure everybody hears this brilliance. Shine on. We want to hear.
Good morning. Thank you all so very much for your honesty and your bluntness, and you've encouraged me to remain the same blunt and not politically correct in any sense of the word as I teach equity and talk policy changes. My question is, I work with a lot of young people as well, and usually of young people from different ethnicities, from different countries. We talk about equity, but they have, my opinion, those white kids have a right to their voice. They have a right to be fearful because of them becoming minorities. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the right to tell our narrative. In telling young people, in my opinion, that I can help, or they can help, these other young people who feel that way understand a little further, because we can't ask for authenticity and not let this person tell me that he wants to call me a nigger. Well, why? You know, is he just saying, oh, Dr. Sherpick, you're a nigger? Or is he telling me a story? Last night, last year, blah, 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 blah. So that I can say, guess what, I understand your story, but the next time you tell it to someone, I recommend not using the nigger word. I'd probably use person of color or something else. But that might be my naivety.
So I hear one action step around engaging young people then, and creating the atmosphere where they can engage. Yes, Brother Luke.
I can honestly say myself, growing up in Detroit, Michigan, the home of ethnic Black Americans. My father was a chief rabbi. Jews, they talk about the Arab nation. We had Arabs in Detroit way before Minnesota, California, whatever. You talk about plight, you talk about hatred, you talk about this. I don't use the word nigger. They called us kites. They called us everything. My father, God rest his soul, wanted me to be a rabbi. You know what I said, Dad? Your sandals are too big. I don't want sand between my toes. And of course, on Friday and Saturday, you had to come up with a speech. May it be a young man being bar mitzvahed or a young girl having a bas mitzvah or wedding. I took to this. This is my weapon. 4 million pictures of 4 million people all over the world. Like the Reverend said, if we don't get together as Americans, black, white, Jew, Gentile, Methodist, Presbyterian, fundamentalist, our country, 200 and some years old, 241 years old, whites, blacks, whatever, Jews, Gentiles, we're going to be annihilated. And I'm a journalist. I'm a photojournalist. I take pride in what I do. I had somebody call me 2 years ago and wanted me to take a picture of some congressman who somewhere up in Ely, Minnesota, as a what do you call it? I forgot the word now, but as a the wrong kind of photographer. I'm not that way. My pictures tell the story. They tell something. They mean something to me. And I thank the doctor. I thank all you, the Reverend, Juan, John, and the rest of you folks for giving me the opportunity of being here and taking pictures of the real world of what's really happening. God bless you. And may they say in Hebrew, Shivat Rihane Ivat. May God look over your left and right shoulder and bless all of you, regardless of race, creed, color, nationality. God bless you.
Let me say that for anybody who isn't white or black, forgive us for being silly and forgetting Native Americans and Asians. I mean, there's so many other people in the world than just black and white.
Oh, yes, please. This will be our final word. Let's make sure we can hear you.
The land of the campus, what was the Native American tribal presence before?
Monacan?
What was it?
Monacan or Monacan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
So we're on Dakota land. And then I had what I'm going to do. I grew up in a white liberal mindset, and I never really believed the police violence stories that I heard until I saw the videos. So I'm going to go forward and continue to grow in my belief, my readiness to believe the stories. And then I'm coming away from this particular session with a question about the problem of these white women evangelicals, and who are they? What is it that's driving them to have voted for Trump? So I'm going to investigate.
Blessings. Go forward.
Thank you. So as we conclude our time together, I feel we could have stayed together all day, all week, all month, all year. We're just getting started. We're not even at the appetizer phase yet. We're at the greeting doing, hi, how are you? That's the power of education. That's the power of the work that we do through the Office for Diversity and Inclusion. That's the power of the forum. But what do we do with all this? Because it's always wonderful to go gather new information and be able to fellowship. We had nice food. And I just want to first start off with thanking our catering service, our planning team from the forum. Can we just put our hands together for our IT? Because they made it possible for us to come together and enjoy our time together and relax a bit. But the last thing I want to leave you with, because oftentimes my students, they tell me, well, I'm woke and I'm changing the world, and I love their enthusiasm. And the beauty of it that's happened over the years is oftentimes once I get done talking to them, they say, oh, I'm going to join the Justice League with you and become a civil rights attorney. But I had to tell one of my students, a very talented Hmong young lady, told me that very thing. I said, absolutely not. You told me that you were going to be a neurologist. I need you to be a neurologist. But she was like, but I love your passion. I want to be a civil rights attorney too. I said, no, because that's not what I'm after. I'm after the consciousness that brings together the heart, mind, and the soul. I told her, I give you the challenge. And she said, well, what can I do in the medical field? I said, I got a challenge for you. We lost a lot of family members and friends, for instance, from breast cancer. How is it we can't figure out how African-American women, we have such late detection and we don't get treatment in time? I said, when you're sitting in those rooms Ask for diversity and who's a part of those studies. When you're sitting in those rooms, let your consciousness guide you on being a cultural broker to make sure people understand what's happening in the hospital. You have a charge. So each of us, it's wonderful to join the Justice League together, but we also have to know it's an interprofessional endeavor, it's an interfaith endeavor, and it's also a journey. So before you leave, you'll receive something. I came bearing gifts. And I thought it must be a divine appointment because U.S. Mint said they didn't have them. They canceled my order. I was going all over the place. You'll receive a coin, and this is not about riches by any means. A quarter can't get you too far. There aren't even phone booths too much anymore. There's one by my church, but I haven't seen them in years. A quarter is not going to get you too far. Maybe a pack of Wrigley's bubble gum. But the reality of what this quarter is all about, you'll get a chance to take a look. It has Frederick Douglass on it. And why am I giving you this quarter? Because I want it to be a reminder of a symbol of the journey that we had today. And I also want to take you to the next level, because oftentimes when I have the conversations about the reality of what racial justice and equity means for me, people say, oh, that's nice. You know, some even shed a few tears. I had to tell one woman, please stop the tears so I can hear myself think. I'm not asking for your pity. I'm not asking for your shame. I'm not asking for your guilt. I'm asking for action. So why am I giving you Frederick Douglass? Because I want us to go from allyship 1.0 to allyship 3.0, which is about being an abolitionist. Being an ally is fine. Great language, scholarly endeavor. Okay, that's great. But that's that interpersonal piece. That's a you and I piece, and maybe you and I and a few others. But really what we heard today was a call to be an abolitionist. It means that we bring forth change in systems. Systems change in our organizations, in our society, and around the world. So I leave you with Frederick Douglass, not to say because people get tense, are you saying I can't be an ally? I had to tell one student I never invited you to be. He just jumped in like, oh, Dr. Tyner, all these civil rights issues, can I be your ally? I said, when? On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Do you take a break on Thursday? What do you do? And as Dr. West talked about, it becomes real. I didn't think it was real. I thought what I was doing, and my parents warned me. They were like, being a civil rights attorney, we prefer for you to do something else. I'm like, no, don't worry. And then the letters came. And then the emails came. And then the comments came. And I'm like, brother ally, are you going to take this blower, this bullet? He got real silent. So I asked you this to join in with me. It might look luxurious when I grab the mic, and you might say, oh, she's so articulate, or I like what she's saying. But there's a cost. There's a cost to this. And I hope that you take this along with you to be reminded of the cost that Pastor Brenda pays every day, Brother Juan, Brother John, Brother West, as he departed us, but also the cost that you must pay. Because the reality is, society and societal change doesn't happen on the wheels of inevitability. It happens based upon you and I taking a stand for justice and taking a stand for change. So with that, I will hand it over to my colleague and friend, Steve. Thank you.
Thanks, Latifah. In 1681, in the state and the colony of Virginia, there was a law written that for the first time in the history of the world defined white as something different from other colors. How do we get from there to here? Hopefully you've heard a little bit of that today. Hopefully, little plug here, you'll come to the forum and hear that story, because I'm going to program that session that was proposed to me. The forum is coming up on April 10th to 12th, 2018, at the Convention Center. Registration will open in December. I hope you'll all be there. But long before that, we need to thank Artika and Wes, disembodied from us, Reverend Brenda, and Juan, and John, for coming all the way from Virginia to tell their story to us so that we can pick up that story and make change here too. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Over there.
Guys, are you? Hi. How are you? What's your name?